because no matter what kind of book you write, there are thousands of other titles that are very similar. Identify a problem in the world. If you're writing a nonfiction book, let's say there's a big problem in the world that everyone is looking for the solution to. That's step one. But then try to determine if you're solving that problem in a unique and different way, because nobody needs another book that's exactly like all the other books out there.
You are listening to Personal Development Mastery, the podcast that empowers you with the simple and consistent actions to take that will help you create a life of purpose and fulfillment. I'm your host, 𝗣𝗍𝗠𝗧𝗦, and this is episode 408. Have you thought of writing a book, but you're not sure how to navigate the complexities of self-publishing? By listening today, you will learn about self-publishing with guidance from a seasoned industry expert. You will discover how to retain creative control and maximize revenue from your book, and you will find out which are the essential services you need to produce a high-quality publication that resonates with readers. Before we dive in, if you enjoy listening and appreciate what we're doing here, the simple, quick favor I'm asking of you is to click the subscribe button. Now let's get started. Today it is my pleasure to speak with Michele DeFilippo. Michele, you have over 50 years of experience in book publishing. You are passionate about empowering authors to navigate the world of self-publishing with confidence and success. And with your company, 1106design, you guide authors at every stage of their publishing journey to retain creative control and revenue from their books. Michele, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Aggie. I appreciate your opportunity you're giving me to be here and talk to your audience.
I'm sure, as I was telling you just before we hit record, that I'm sure there are many listening right now that the idea of writing and publishing a book has crossed their mind. And I think they should, because it is many of us, if not all of us, have a book, at least one book inside them. Bringing it out has so many benefits, and maybe we can discuss also about that, but let's not go there yet. I was curious, I would like to start with something about your story, because you have a vast experience over these years of publishing. I want to ask, what made you, at what point you realized that there was something wrong and that's my own word, wrong, it's not your word, but there was something not right in the publishing industry and made you decide that you want to do something, to help people get better informed and so on?
Yes. Well, independent publishing, self-publishing, as it was originally intended, meant the author was the publisher. And that was the greatest opportunity for authors that ever existed, right? For the first time in history, they didn't have to get anyone's approval to produce their book. They could produce the book that they wanted to produce and be in complete control of it, and also earn all the revenue from sales when a book was sold. Mm-hmm. So that was the promise of original independent publishing about 25 years ago. But I started doing these podcasts because over the years, I noticed that different kinds of companies started coming into the space who didn't necessarily know much about publishing. They were more like serial entrepreneurs who knew how to market very well on the internet, but they didn't necessarily have the expertise in publishing to put out good books. And they also charged the author to produce the book and also took their revenue from sales when a book was sold. So original self-publishing meant the author received all the revenue from sales, just like a regular publisher. And so that misinformation, that was part of it. The other part of it is that in my business, I get calls every single week from someone who had a bad experience, who tried to self-publish by following the advice that you're likely to find on the internet. And either the company disappeared or the company wasn't paying their royalties, or the files that were produced would not successfully upload to the printer. All kinds of issues started to occur. And of course, we've all seen self-published books that just plain look terrible, right? So I just couldn't stand it anymore because I've been in the industry 50 years, and publishing has always been an industry where everyone with expertise got together to produce a book and to produce a quality book that people would get something from reading and would enjoy reading. And so it just, I was sitting there and I was getting annoyed, and one day I just thought to myself, well, I can continue getting annoyed or I can start to do something about it. And coincidentally, at the same time, someone just taught me about Podmatch to check out podcasting. And so I went on there and they made it so easy to connect with hosts, because what had held me back before was that, gee, maybe I should do podcasts, but how on earth do I find anybody who would be interested? So Podmatch addressed that issue, and I've done about 20 podcasts right now, and I'm just loving the opportunity to remind people what independent publishing is supposed to be.
That's great. And I will also, from my point of view, since you brought Podmatch up, I will digress for a moment and also express my gratitude to this amazing app and platform that Alex DeFilippo has created. That is for me, it is one of the main ways I use to arrange my podcast. So, having said that, I will go back into publishing, and I wanted to clarify something. So you mentioned independent publishing. Can you tell me what is the difference between independent publishing and self-publishing? Are they the same? Is there something different between them?
Well, as it started out, independent publishing, like I said, meant that the author was the publisher.
Okay.
But over time, and it meant the author was the publisher, and that they would do everything that a traditional publisher would in terms of hiring the experts to create the book, right, and creating a good book and earning the revenue. Okay. Then the term self-publishing started to be used, and that term became misunderstood and became do-it-yourself publishing, right? All of a sudden, right, there was 1 million people on the internet telling authors that you can design your own cover. You don't need to hire experts. You don't need to spend money and get any experts to help you. You can do everything yourself. And that has led to just a huge, another earthquake in publishing, right? Because now when people buy a book, they can't be sure that it's a good book the way we used to be able to be confident in that. Now they don't know if it's just somebody who did it themselves, doesn't know what they're doing, and put out a poor quality book.
I get it. And thank you for clarifying that. And especially the do-it-yourself, as you said. Having had my own personal experience with self-publishing a book last year, my first book, I found I had probably good teaching or mentoring. I found that doing your cover yourself, it's not a good idea unless you are a graphics designer. Also trying to do the Kindle version yourself, it's probably a waste of time. Anyway, I realized that there are things that, yes, I was self-publishing, but there were things that I needed someone else to help me with, rather than doing everything on my own. Of course, I could have done everything on my own. The quality of it, as you say, it would be very, very questionable. It would mean that I have to fulfill all these roles as well myself, which is rarely, if ever, the case. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's we can't be an expert at everything, right? No matter how smart you are, there's only 24 hours in a day. So most of us have to pick something to work at, to be good at, to educate ourselves about. And, you could do one or two things maybe, but there's 5 or 6 skills needed to produce a good book. And that's where we come in. We have the team in place to just give authors all of those skills in one easy place instead of them having to go out and hire 6 or 7 freelancers and try to manage the whole process.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Then we will talk about that. I wanted, before we go there, can you give me a very brief overview about, let's say someone now listening to us are thinking that, I would like to write a book, or I already know what it is going to be about, or something like that. Can you give me very briefly some of the advantages that self-publishing has compared to the traditional publishing? Is there someone that maybe they should, and I will ask in a different way, because I think, and having also experienced the self-publishing, I realize that the advantages are obvious for me, but I want to ask in a different way as well. Who is it that shouldn't go down that path and would go to a traditional publishing path? And I'm not going to stay there much, but just for a clarification, because we need to mention the other side as well, the very traditional that has been for a long time.
Well, the first thing to remember is that you don't choose a traditional publisher, they choose you. Right. And they're very, very selective of the kinds of books and the authors that they take on. We work with a literary agent once in a while who sometimes has a good book that he can't place with a traditional publisher for whatever reason. And he told me once that traditional publishers want someone who has a platform of at least 100,000 social media followers. Right. So unless you're there, and I don't think very many people can say that they're there, your chances of getting published traditionally are pretty slim. But in addition to that, even if you are picked up by a traditional publisher, they're going to take control of your book because they're investing the money to produce it and they know what they're doing and they want to make sure that the book sells. So they're going to change it editorially. They're not going to give you a whole lot of input into the cover design. And it's still up to the author generally to market the book. So if you think of all of that, why wouldn't you independently publish, right? But it's a daunting experience because authors are overwhelmed with the number of services they need. Some of them may try to do it themselves and quickly discover that they don't know enough about all the things to do it well. And so they gravitate to what I call these intermediate publishers, such as self-publishing companies or hybrid publishers or independent publishing companies. And what these companies are doing are charging people to produce the book and taking their revenue from sales, which is not very advantageous to the author.
If you enjoy this episode, can you think of one person that would find it useful and share it with them? I'd really appreciate it. It helps the show grow and you will also be adding value to people you care about. Thank you. And now let's get back to the episode. You mentioned already a couple of times those services, those essential services that an aspiring author or someone who wants to self-publish a book should reach out and have, professional help, if I can put it like that. Can you outline those services in a nutshell so that someone listening now can know what is needed beyond their own effort? So what kind of services are we talking about?
Okay, well, the first thing every author needs is an editor, right? Because we can't see our own mistakes when we write. So the services of a professional book editor are absolutely essential. Most of the time when we do a book, the author will come to us and they'll say, my manuscript is just about ready. I've fixed everything that needs to be fixed. And then our editor takes over and finds hundreds and hundreds of things that needed to be fixed. And the authors are just amazed. It's like, oh my goodness, I never thought of any of these things. So a professional editor is your best friend because they're going to look at the book as the eventual reader will, and they're going to find all the things that you think you said correctly because you know what you mean to say, but the eventual reader will read that same sentence and maybe say to themselves, what? I don't get what the author's trying to say there. And editors will find that for you. And they'll smooth out the language and fix grammar and punctuation and all of that. And they'll make sure that you don't repeat yourself too many times. We once had a situation where a fiction author killed off one of the characters in an early chapter, and then he magically came back to life toward the end of the book. and that's easy to do, right? Because you're not sitting down and writing the book in one session, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the editor said, he died in chapter 3. What did I miss here? He's now suddenly back to life. So, sometimes an editor will find funny things like that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so editor, that's one. Who else? We mentioned the graphic designer for the cover.
Yes, and I would just say follow what traditional publishers do. Right, a traditional publisher will always hire an editor, a cover designer, mm-hmm. An interior page designer. People don't know that. Now you hear the word formatting all over the internet, but the book first has to be designed before it's formatted for easy readability and mm-hmm. to be in line with the subject matter that you're talking about. And then after interior design, then we do interior typesetting, not formatting. Typesetting is a whole different thing, which I could talk about for days. And then after that, after all the corrections are done, then we would proofread. After the typesetting is done, we would proofread the book one final time to catch all the things that were missed along the way. And then we would make the ebook.
That's great. One thing also, Michele, I want to clarify, and we'll carry on with that. How much, when we talk about self-publishing, for me, and I suppose for many other people, the company that comes to mind is Amazon. So mm-hmm. how much associated is Amazon with self-publishing? Can there be self-publishing outside Amazon, or are we talking about putting the book on Amazon through Amazon?
Okay, so Amazon isn't actually a publisher. You are the publisher, or some other entity is the publisher. So Amazon is, in industry terms, the distributor of your book.
Okay, great.
And they make your book available to the public. Okay, mm-hmm. So what was your question again? I'm sorry.
I think you've already answered it, because you said that it is not the publisher but the distributor. So, but you need someone to distribute your book.
Yes.
When it's otherwise there is no. That's why I answered, because that's why I asked you the question, because it is publishing without distribution. What's the point of it? So you need that as an extension. So my question was, how much of all that is for how much of all that Amazon is necessary, or how much of it do you need to get involved with Amazon at any stage? It might be the distribution or earlier stages.
Yeah, you have to have Amazon. You have to be on Amazon. Every once in a while, we'll run into somebody who doesn't want to use Amazon, but I remind them that 80% of all books in the world are sold on Amazon.
Right.
So you can't ignore them. But there is we set up our clients with 2 print-on-demand accounts in their own name, the Amazon, of course, and then there's another one called IngramSpark.com, which is the largest books wholesaler in the world. And they distribute the book to everyone other than Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, libraries, bookstores, and so forth. So by using both of these platforms together, an author can have the widest distribution at the lowest cost.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's very useful. There is something else I was reading. You talk about some critical decisions that the authors need to make when they consider self-publishing. So can you share some of those critical decisions? Let's say someone listening right now, again, he or she is in that position that they're about to do it, or maybe they've started writing something. What critical decisions and what stages does one need to make those decisions in the journey?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, if you're thinking about writing a book, you believe you have something to say. That's given. That's a given. But what you should do is some research and make sure that the world needs your book to the extent that you're able to do that research, right? Because no matter what kind of book you write, there are thousands of other titles that are very similar. So you should identify a problem in the world. If you're writing a nonfiction book, let's say there's a big problem in the world that everyone is looking for the solution to. That's step one. But then try to determine if you're solving that problem in a unique and different way, because nobody needs another book that's exactly like all the other books out there. So, but if you can be unique, then that creates your marketing strategy, right? Because now you have a message. You can go out there and tell people that I have a different solution than you've probably heard before, and you can learn all about it in my book, right? The other decision that I think authors should think about is whether or not they're publishing a book as a hobby or as a business, right? Because there's a lot of information out there, as you know, that there are cheaper ways to produce a book, shortcuts, cutting corners, if you will. So if your book is a hobby and you don't intend for anybody to be entertained by it except yourself and maybe your family, then you can take advantage of some of those shortcuts. But if your book is a business, if you expect people to spend their hard-earned money to purchase your book, then you have to meet a higher standard. And that's of course what we do and what publishing specialists do. But you're not going to, in other words, I see a lot of authors who think they can get away with a lower standard and sell their book. And my message is you cannot get away with that. Buyers know quality. Buyers know the difference. And if they feel that their money was wasted, if they find typos in your book or if the information isn't correct, they're going to post a bad review, and you can never get rid of that. So if your intent is to sell the book, not only will quality services help you do that, but quality services will help you get good reviews and get that word of mouth advertising that's important after it's published.
Thank you. I was curious, what is, from your experience, the most common mistake you see authors who want to self-publish that make? I'm sure there are many that you've seen, but let's start with the biggest one that comes to mind.
Oh, there's many, as you said. Sometimes they do not let the experts do what they're trained to do and what they know how to do. It's fine to be able to say self-publishing lets me do what I want, but there's a middle ground there where hopefully you can listen to the experts and understand that they've been doing this longer than you have, and what they're suggesting is for your benefit, not just to push you around. So there's that. The do-it-yourself mistake is the biggest of all, because it's just common sense that if you're not trained in an area, that you're not going to get the same results as an expert does. Doesn't matter what, I mean, I can go build a doghouse, but that doesn't mean it's going to be available for sale at Walmart. It's not going to be up to par. So same is true with books, and that's just common sense. And then the biggest mistake they make is that they don't want to market their book. And that hurts my heart, because a lot of times authors are introverts and they'll say to me, well, I can't go out there and talk about myself. That's just not something I want to do. But, if people don't know about your book, how can they buy it? So I would think about, try to get over that if you can, even though it's out of your comfort zone. Try to get yourself in a mental position where you are confident in your book and you can talk about it.
Since you brought marketing up, do you have any advice for specifically marketing a book? The principles of marketing, of course, are very similar to many areas, but specifically on a book that is self-publishing, what is it? Let's say, what do you advise the people that you work with that self-publish the book?
Well, the first fundamental requirement for marketing is to put out a good product, right? Whatever your product or service is. And that also applies to books, right? Because if people look at your book and they immediately decide it's a low quality self-published book, then all your marketing dollars are wasted, right? So that's the first requirement. You've got to give people their money's worth if you want them to be happy with your book. So creating a quality book with the help of experts also gives you confidence, because now you know your book is the best it can be, and that makes it easier for you to get out there and talk about it. Mm-hmm. So we have like 2 marketing approaches on our website. We have some marketing resources where the author can take advantage of it and educate themselves about how to market the book themselves. Mm-hmm. And then we also introduce people to 3 marketing experts that we trust and that we know are going to give them good, honest advice and not just take their money if they want to have an expert handle that for them.
Mm-hmm. And apart from ads, shall we say, is there any other way that you think it's useful or necessary for someone to use to market the book?
You mean ads online ads?
Whatever ads. I'm not sure what exactly you meant earlier when you said about marketing experts. That's why I assumed you mean some kind of advertising, of paid advertising.
Yeah, well, some people do that. I've also heard some people waste a lot of money on ads that don't have an effect. So if you're going to do ads, you better work with somebody who can prove that they can get results for you, not just someone who's going to shotgun out a whole bunch of ads and spend a lot of your money and not get any results. The one service we offer is the author marketing training. And that's where one of my marketing experts will actually work with you and show you how to market your own book on social media. And that's much less expensive because it only costs your time, right? So they'll do research and they'll show you where your audience is likely to be found online. They'll come up with book reviewers, blog writers, platforms where people are discussing your topic and so forth, so that you don't waste your time trying to talk to everybody. You focus on where your audience is online.
That's so important indeed. So thank you for sharing that. Michele, I also wanted to ask you, now that when I was thinking about, the topics that I could discuss with you, since I have very recent experience, personal experience of self-publishing my book, that actually happened December of 2023. So, not so long ago. I still have fresh the memories of, the launch, shall we say, when the book became live on Amazon and Kindle. There were so many things that I learned, but the one that I feel more compelled to ask you about, because I still up to now haven't figured it out completely, or why it happened was that Amazon created a mix-up in the countries. So people in some countries, for example in my country Greece, where there is no Amazon site, there is no specific Greek Amazon, so they need to order it either from the German one or the English one or something else. So there was a mix-up because they couldn't even get the Kindle version, which I thought that, if you direct someone to the American Amazon, the Amazon.com, and say, okay, here's the Kindle version, I thought, or I assumed that anyone in the world could purchase the Kindle version. However, I found out that this was not the case. So it became very interesting having people messaging me and saying, you know what, we can't get the book. So that was a very, yes. So eventually it happened, but I think there was some precious time that lost during the launch to push the book further up. So I don't know if you have any idea about it. If not, that's all right. It was just something. Probably I wanted to get it off my chest.
Well, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm really surprised that Amazon doesn't have a Greek version of the platform. It seems an awful lot of people there.
Countries. Oh well, in Europe there are, I think, 5 different countries, the biggest countries. So not every single country has their own version of Amazon.
Oh.
So
well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But one of the early gurus in self-publishing used to tell a joke. He said, a bookstore is a lousy place to sell a book because a lot of authors don't know that Amazon takes 40% of the cover price right off the top. Mm-hmm. And for listing your book. And so when a book is sold right away, you lose 40% to Amazon, and other retailers take at least 40% and sometimes as high as 55% of the cover price. But fortunately now there are some other ways to sell your book. IngramSpark, the platform I mentioned before, has just come out with something called a shareable purchase link. And you can put a link on your website that allows people to order the book, and IngramSpark will print the book and ship it to the buyer for you. And you won't have to pay that wholesale discount. Excuse me. They do charge shipping and handling fee, but it's still less than 40%. And so there's more money in your pocket as well as more control if you use those shareable purchase links.
That's great. Thank you, Michele. There are a couple of final questions that actually I always ask my guests since I started doing the podcast a long time ago. But before I do that, where will you direct a listener who wants to find out more about your service?
Okay, well, I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. You can reach me at my website, 1106design.com. And if you go there, I will give you a free copy of my little book called Publish Like the Pros. You can put in your email address and I'll let you download a PDF version of it. And this is just a quick read. It's only 88 pages, but it's a survey of all the things you need to know about self-publishing a book. It goes into a little bit about the financial side of things and how you can make sure that you earn as much money as possible when that book is sold in a retail environment. And I will talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime. If you'd like a free consultation, you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your book by filling out our contact form. Mm-hmm. And we're happy to talk to anyone.
That's great. Thank you. And so let me ask you, I have 2 questions I always ask to my guests. And the first one is, what does personal development mean to you?
Oh, gosh. I opened my first business in 1980 when I found myself living in Phoenix and not able to make more than minimum wage. So I started in business, and that really has been a personal development journey from the very beginning. When you're in business, there's always something that you're learning and new challenges that you're meeting. So just put one foot in front of the other and try to meet each challenge as it comes along.
That's great. And a hypothetical question. If you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give her?
Be brave. Be braver. When you feel afraid, just get through it and push through it and do whatever it is you're afraid of doing, because on the other side of that is a lot of growth and development that you never imagined.
Michele, is there anything that you were hoping I would ask you today and I completely missed it?
No, you ask great questions. Thank you. I can't think of a single thing.
Thank you as well. I want to thank you very much for your time, for sharing your wisdom and experience with us and with the listener who is an aspiring author, I would like to think, because I think we mentioned it in the beginning that each of us, if not all of us, have a book inside. So taking it out, getting it out into the world is important, in my personal opinion. Before we conclude, what's one piece of advice you would give someone listening now that has listened to the whole conversation? What's one preferably actionable piece of advice you would give her or him?
Well, I would just say focus on quality. If you're going to do a book, do it well. And if you have to save up the money to do that, then delay and save up until you have the money to do it. The solution to affordable self-publishing is not to put out a lousy book and hope to get away with it, because customers will not let you get away with that. So just, don't go into debt or anything to buy a book, because the book industry is very competitive. But if you must wait until you can save up money to do it right, then that's always a good strategy, because you're doing the right thing for your customer. You're helping them, and it's the right thing to do to give people their money's worth when they buy your book.
And before I end today's episode, if you enjoy this podcast, can you think of one person that would find it useful and share it with them? I'd really appreciate it. It helps the show grow, and you also add value to people you care about. Thank you. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,